Good morning, everyone. I feel like I just went through security at Heathrow Airport, getting mic'd up here and everything, but proud to be here. I am so impressed with this school. I cannot even begin to tell you. And the administration that you have here on campus is extraordinary. Where's Linda Spargo? Shout out to, there you go. There's one of them. If you don't know her, get to know her. What an advocate for all of you and for the school. It's a remarkable institution. I wish I would have had the opportunity to attend this school, but that wasn't in the cards. Well, the good news is if I did come here, I would have stayed forever and maybe not have ever left and not achieved the extraordinary things I was able to accomplish. I've been asked today to express to you the road on my professional journey. And so it's not specific to marketing, but there's an attachment to it, I promise you. And I know you'll get something out of it, and you'll let me know because we'll have time for Q&A. Most important thing I can say to you is to dare to be different. Don't stay in your own little rabbit hole. It doesn't work. You're different already, but not in the sense I want to describe to you. And so here's how it started. It sounds kind of corny. It could be like a Dumbo movie, but I used to stand in the mirror as a little girl, 8 years old, and pretend to be something I wasn't or I never thought I could be, to be honest. I thought, oh, gee, you know, I want to run a company. I want to be a sports journalist. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be Phyllis George reincarnated. She was the first ABC television spokesperson for what was then not even ESPN, but she made it big in sports journalism, and I was a huge jock, still am. And I would just say, you know what, I could be anything. I could be the head of a business, I could be a sports journalist, I could be president of the United States. That's how I felt. And it wasn't because it just came from somewhere, I don't know where. And I wasn't from a family with a great deal of money. Money had nothing to do with anything. Zero, okay, zero. Very much from a blue-collar family. My dad worked 3 jobs, so my brother and I could have anything we wanted, but just be the best we could be. And whether it was my basketball or softball, I had notoriety in sports, nothing that earned me a scholarship in any way, shape, or form. But I just thought, you know what? Whatever I do, I'm going to do it to perfection. I studied really hard. My brother would watch me study, and he said, what are you doing? This is ridiculous. He was the kind of kid that didn't have to show up for school and get straight A's, but that wasn't me. And I really built a lot of self-confidence through my academics and sports. That was pretty much it. I got the courage to run for a state pageant, a local pageant in New Jersey. I won Miss Vineland. It was a community of maybe 60,000 people, 1,100 kids in my high school graduating class, and went on to what I thought I was going to pursue was Miss New Jersey, but there's a backstory to that which we won't go into. Not pretty. So I never made it to the next level. That was pretty disheartening. But indirectly, I got there in the end because I spent 5 years on the board of Miss America, which was so fulfilling to me beyond any expectations, watching young women succeed not only on physical beauty and abilities, but also on academic strength and certainly maturity and character. I couldn't go to a school like Ole Miss. There was no way. My parents could afford it. Not a shot. And I somehow believed, though, that I could really dare to be very, very different. I could be different, and I always wanted to set myself apart from my peers. So the world is about what you really have in front of you, which is a lot. It's a big world. It's a fascinating world. It's a world full of interesting people. And I've been so proud to be on the road to take that journey that was afforded me. And it wasn't because it was easy. It was really very much hard work. I always believed I could make my own luck. You do make your own luck. It just doesn't fall from the sky and there's a rainbow over your head. There is, but what do you do with it? That's the whole key. When I woke up in the morning to the time I went to bed at night, I just wanted to be the best that I could be in my academics, number one, and in my sports. It didn't afford me scholarships, but notable headlines, right? It's pretty cool as a young woman to pitch a no-hitter twice and to score 33 points in a basketball game where you're playing the best high school in the state of New Jersey. I did it. It was cool. But it polished me. And it really polished me on making great friends and communicating well. Different things in life teach you that. For me, it was sports. For others, it's music. For others, it's whatever, okay? It's whatever. But self-confidence is extremely important in this life. If you don't believe in yourself, there is no one that will believe in you. No one. And it's hard. And remember, it's hard work. And hard work will never kill you. It will only make you stronger. And this is where it just begins, at least for me. Goal setting and positive thinking. And mine was as an educator. I wanted to be a school teacher, and I was. And I wanted to be the best school teacher possible. I admired a couple of my teachers that I just wanted to be just like them. So I went to school for education and advertising and communications. I was a marketing major, but I had a double major, and I was certified K through 12. I could teach any grade I wanted when I finished. I was on the right track. I was top of my class in college, 4.0, studied day and night. And when I wasn't studying, I was working. I was working really hard. I had 3 jobs. I was I modeled way back in the day. Probably find that hard to believe now, but I did. And I was a teacher at the Barbizon School of Modeling, and I worked as a retail executive in Gimbels and Strawbridge and Clothier, and ended up modeling, newspaper, mostly print modeling for those stores. And I got a very fortunate position to become a promotional model for the Estee Lauder company. Just happened. All this while I was studying and working my tail off, day and night, with a pot of coffee, which I don't drink anymore. I'm really, you know how sometimes you eat so much of one thing, you never want to see it again? Well, coffee is the one thing I don't want to ever see again. And I ended up landing a job after college as a 8th grade school teacher. I wanted 12th. I didn't necessarily want the little ones, but 8th grade, lucky me. That is, I'm sorry, okay, you're not in 8th grade, so I could say this, but that is probably the most difficult of all the grades to teach. And I loved it, though. It was a lot of fun. It lasted 1 year for a whopping salary of $9,000. And when I graduated, there weren't many jobs. You know, life goes in cycles. There's a lot of jobs, then there's no jobs, then there's jobs in a certain field, other jobs in other fields and then none in others. But at that time, teachers, it was pretty much a full deck. It was hard to get a job. So I went to a high school in Millville, New Jersey. It was a big school, again, about 1,000 kids. And I taught 8th grade for 1 year. It was a lot of fun. I was dating my husband in high school. High school sweethearts. It's now 40 years, but we've known each other for 45 years, long time. And he got he had an opportunity to become an Army officer through ROTC. And he went to one college, I went to another. We weren't that far apart, but far enough where we could do what we needed to do. And he had to move to Killeen, Texas, Fort Hood. And it was either a choice for me to do my thing. I had an offer to be an intern at WABC in Philadelphia, and I passed on it. We got married and moved to Texas, of all places, Texas, from a little violin girl, Philadelphia girl, all the way to Texas, and got married and moved. Big choice in life, huge choice in my life. But I did it, and I got to the Army base, and I was like, here we are in Killeen, Texas. I can't do this. I lasted 2 weeks. It was the white glove. The women had to be the wives of the military officers, and luncheons and teas. I wasn't a luncheon and tea kind of gal. There was no way that was going to work. So I said to Bill, my husband, I said, look, here's the deal. I'm going to live in Dallas. You can stay here. We'll see each other on weekends. I needed to do something else. So I moved to Dallas. We moved to Dallas. We saw each other on weekends. It wasn't that far away from one another. And I had my eye on this school. I used to drive by it on Northwest Highway in Dallas, Texas. It was called the Fashion and Art Institute of Dallas. And I wanted to teach there. I figured, why not? Marry my fashion opportunity to my communication skills, to my advertising skills. It's a perfect world. I'm going to teach there. So I went off to see Dean Earl Wheeler. Never forget him. Interviewed with him once, twice, 3 times, and he looked at me and he said, this is not going to happen. You're younger than some of my students. And I was like, yeah, probably, right? I was 23. And I thought, okay, I get it. But I was still determined to teach there. Absolutely determined. There was no way I wasn't going to take that fork in the road. No way. I wanted it so badly. And you know when you want something so badly, you can walk through that wall and come out standing on the other side. That's how bad I wanted it. So I kept going back and going back and going back, and I kept doing syllabuses and writing summaries of courses that I thought they would be very interested in that they didn't have. I studied their curriculum, studied. They didn't really have a speech and communication program. I developed a whole curriculum around speech and communication. Still no go. And then I thought, okay, I have one better. The ground shook at times. Yes, I was scared. I was apprehensive. But it was worth it because I just decided I'm going to really conquer this. There was no way I wasn't going to conquer it. So I tirelessly got the job as the teacher, as a very important teacher at the Fashion and Art Institute of Dallas. I taught speech, I taught communication, and I took all my practical and education experience and applied it to the school. There was that fork in the road for me. That was the major fork in the road when I got that job. And I thought, what can I do to make a really big difference? What's the one thing I can do to make the most remarkable difference for this school? Well, I started a course. The class was entitled Speaking from the Outside In. And it was Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock. They gave me a great time slot. It's kind of like getting a TV show and you're competing against Ellen DeGeneres or Oprah. Okay, that was impossible. Everybody wanted to leave at 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, but they stayed, and I'll tell you why. Speaking from the Outside In was a course where I invited industry professionals from very, very diverse backgrounds, very diverse. Fashion, television, art, everything. And anybody I could find, I grabbed my hands on, and I enlightened them on the school and invited them to come in and speak. So here were some of those people. My very first speaker was Stanley Marcus, the owner of Neiman Marcus. The owner, he started it. He was 70-year-old then. He's obviously not alive now. But he spoke to my students, and he gave them his book, Rag to Riches, and they loved him. He was quite a character, quite a character. And he was my first one that signed up with me. And Anna Wintour, the editor of Vogue magazine, who was just a young buck at that time. She just had started. And Dallas was a big fashion center. I don't know if you realized that, you wouldn't, but you know, the world of fashion has changed so much. It's an international, global force of nature, quite frankly. But Dallas was one of those major fashion centers. It was huge. And there was a place called the Dallas Apparel Mart, and everybody came. It was mandatory. Kim Dawson was the modeling agency. There were manufacturers from all over the world that showed in the Dallas Apparel Mart. That's where they landed. It was either New York, Dallas, or Los Angeles. Those were the three markets in America. And they all came, so I figured this is perfect. I can get them to speak. So Anna came. She was terrific. She's shy. You all probably have seen The Devil Wears Prada, and she comes off as being this nasty, horrible person, but very successful. But she's not. She's not nasty. She's not horrible. She's shy. And she spoke to my students. I ended up signing her son up for, she asked me, she called me one day and said, can you hire Charlie as an intern, but not because he's my son? And I said, I'm not sure I can. We didn't have internships. So I met Charlie, and long story short, Charlie was an intern, but not for me. He had more journalistic skills, so I sent him to the editorial department. Charlie's now a heart surgeon, and great kid. But the big breakthrough is I met two people that did teach at the conference with me. And one was Olivia Thompson, first female executive in publishing ever. She ran Fairchild Publications. She was my personal godmother. She got me started in this business, to be honest. She's now my daughter's godmother. A true rock star back in the day and still is today. But I met this gentleman named Glenn Broussard, and he was an interesting character. He went to Duke, I remember that, and he was the head of the Dallas Apparel News, and it was out of the Apparel Mart in Dallas, Texas. And it served all the retailers that came to Dallas as a community to buy merchandise. There were individual individual showrooms for every manufacturer, not only in the country, in the world. I mean, Giorgio Armani showed at the Dallas Apparel Mart. That's how big it was. It's not anymore, and I can get to that if you have questions later. I'll explain why the world of fashion, like everything else, changes. So he said to me, after the seminar where he spoke to the students, I had now been teaching for probably 3 years, 7 in the morning till 1 in the afternoon. And he said, did you ever think of selling advertising? I said, selling what? He said, selling advertising in a magazine. I think you'd be great. And I said, well, I can't do that. I'm teaching. How would that work? And he said, well, I don't know. You figure it out if you want to try. He said, what I can do is give you the California territory. So therefore, the time difference, I could teach in the morning, and I could sell advertising from 1 o'clock in the afternoon until 7, 8 o'clock at night to California manufacturers. Sell ads, basically, sell advertising. And California was the growing market at that time. If you're not in the capital of the world, which is New York, and still is, and always will be, I'm a New Yorker, die hard. And if you're not in Dallas, you're in LA. So I did it. I did it for 5 years. Got up at 5 in the morning, was at the school at 7, taught until 1, went to the apparel mart, got on the phone, sold advertising, made the Dallas Apparel News the #1 news organization at the Dallas Apparel Mart and in the fashion community across the United States. And back to the name I told you not to forget, Olivia Thompson called me one day, and she said, I'd like to see you for a coffee. And I said, that would be great. Let's meet. She was staying at the mansion on Turtle Creek in Dallas, Texas. But then she didn't call me again, and I was like a little, okay, that was kind of a fluke. I called her. Dare to be different, right? Put yourself out there. Don't be afraid. I called her. I said, Olivia, I was intrigued that you wanted to have me, meet me at breakfast or have a lunch, but you didn't call back. And she said, no, let's meet. I just got busy, whatever. And she looked at me and she goes, you're killing me. I said, what do you mean I'm killing you? She goes, you stole 33% of my advertising from Women's Wear Daily Dallas to the Apparel News. 33% of the advertising I stole away. I was in charge of the designer section of the Apparel Mart, which was the 3rd floor. It was called the Collections. And that's when I really met interesting people. And when you meet interesting people in your life, they come one at a time. Sometimes they come in droves. Some days you don't meet anybody. It's okay, but you remember everybody you meet, and you keep in touch with everybody you meet. And I said, okay, Olivia, like, is there a job at Women's Wear Daily? That would be my dream. My father was a garment manufacturer. He brought Women's Wear Daily home every day, every day. Women's Wear Daily was published in Vineland, New Jersey. That was the printing plant, Vineland, New Jersey. Just so happened, so I got it every day. And every day I wanted to work at Women's Wear, but I never thought that would happen. So she said, I have a job for you, but it's not for Women's Wear Daily. And I was like, oh, great, okay. She said, I have this new magazine called Retail, Technology, and Operations. And I'm thinking, what is that? Just to get into Fairchild, I'm going to go work for this stupid magazine called There's No Way. And she said, well, you'll be calling on cash register people, the clip-on stuff they put on your clothes, the sensors for clothes, retail sensors so you couldn't steal and get out of the store, standard register. I was like, oh my God. I said, no, I don't really, I'm not interested. He says, well, that's the way you're going to get into the company. If you want to come to women's wear, I don't have an opening right now, but I have a new magazine. Well, I mulled it over and I thought, all right, time to look at that fork in the road again. Do I still need to be teaching from 7 in the morning until 1, and then selling advertising until 7 o'clock at night, and having to cover my classes when I had to travel, which I had to do? So I took a shot. I said, okay, I'm doing it. So I resigned from the apparel news. I went, and here I was in Des Moines, Iowa, literally. I looked like a Martian, the only dark-haired woman in Iowa. Okay, I get off the plane and be like, I felt like I was in another world or another planet. And we took that magazine to $10 million in a year and a half. That's where my make your own luck strategy came in, and it paid off. She got an opening for me to run Women's Wear Daily Dallas, and we blew it out of the sky. I mean, Women's Wear Daily Dallas was that big. It looked like the September issue of Vogue. And then Atlanta became a fashion center. The Atlanta market, the airport there, if you think about it in geography aspect, New York, Atlanta, Dallas, LA, it made sense for buyers to come. Instead of all the way to Dallas, they came to Atlanta. And I started WWD Atlanta. We moved. My husband was very supportive again, and we took the chance. I opened up the Atlanta office, and shortly thereafter, I was named the advertising director of Women's Wear Daily International. And we had to move to New York. And that was a scary thought. The ground was really shaking. That made me nervous. And my husband looked at me and he said, I never want you ever to look at me 30 years from now and say, I should have tried, but I didn't. Let's go. So we did. We moved to New York, and I became the advertising director of WWD. Dare to be different, right? I just wanted to dare to be different. I wanted to take that fork in the road. If it didn't work, what's the worst that could happen if it didn't work? What's the worst that could happen? You go back to what you were doing, or you find something else. It didn't matter. The ground was shaking, though. And I ended up in New York, and it wasn't much of a salary. Now that I look back, to live in New York is expensive. It was then, it is now. And I was offered a menial salary. It was fine. I had to prove myself. You always have to prove yourself, every day. Every day is a new day, and it's a challenge. Every day. Off I went. 2 months, I'm in the job of my dreams, the job of a lifetime. And I was called into Mr. Fairchild's office, and he said to me, well, I have some good news. And I said, really, that's great. What is it? And he said, you're going to be the new publisher of W Magazine. W Magazine was not a magazine. It was an old, stodgy newspaper for rich people that had a median household income of $1 million or more. That was it. It was read by little old ladies on Park Avenue. The circulation was only 150,000. And I was flabbergasted. I was so upset. I was distraught that I had come all this way to be put in the penalty box. And he said, well, this is what we want you to do. So I went home that night and I said to my husband, you're not going to believe this one. I hate to admit it, I'm not a huge crier unless it's something to do with my family or close friends, but I was beside myself. I don't want to do this. And my husband said to me, you go where the company asks you to go. That's what you do. We're here now. That's what they want you to do. Do it. So I followed my marching orders, but I wasn't very happy about working for this stodgy old newspaper, really stodgy old newspaper. Beautiful, by the way. If I had a copy of it, which I wish I could have brought with me, but they're back home in New York, designers covered their wall with W magazine. It was this big, and it was a fold-over newspaper. But Donna Karan had ads in it, and Ralph Lauren. They used to wallpaper their offices with W magazine. But then they decided that we don't really need this newspaper. It's too old. It's too outdated. It only had 170,000 circulation. The magazine was 170,000, which is nothing. And I couldn't sell any advertising in it. It was over before I got there. Let's put it that way. It was over. And in fashion, there's 2 seasons that are critical in fashion. And all the marketing's tied toward those 2 seasons. You're either a star in the spring collections or the fall. That's it. You're only as good as your last runway collection. That's it. Well, I arrived 1 month before fall, which is the biggest issue of the year. And I was called down into Mr. Fairchild's office, and he said, we had a big issue called What's in Store. And it was like getting the Neiman Marcus book mailed to your home. It was selling jets, selling designer jewelry, everything over the top. Nothing that I was used to coming from my humble beginnings. I was like in another world where I didn't belong. I didn't even understand it. So I said, Mr. Fairchild, there are no ads in What's in Store. None. Neiman Marcus had pulled their business. Mr. Armani had pulled his business. They found other avenues. They went to Vogue. They went to this brand new magazine called In Style, which I'll get back to. In Style was taking a lot of business away from every magazine, Glamour, Allure, everything. And I figured I have to do some great marketing here, or I have to change something drastically. So I took it upon myself. It was not a great move. I decided to start a real magazine, a perfect bound magazine, as an insert into the newspaper to get people excited. And myself and our editor, Patrick McCarthy, who passed away just 3 weeks ago, I lost my work husband, tragically. And we, behind the scenes, ordered the paper for a magazine. We didn't tell anybody. I went out and sold all the advertising. Mr. Armani, I went to see personally. He bought 6 pages and the back cover. I went to Lauder. I got Estee Lauder to take the inside front cover. I went to Donna, who begrudged, she just didn't want to do it. She has her wall covered with the old W. And I got her to participate. Neiman's, Macy's, on and on and on and on and on and on. The ads kept coming in. People were excited. I'm driving into New York City one day. It's snowstorm, major snowstorm. And if you can imagine, back in the day, none of you would ever have experienced this, but it was a phone in a car that looked like the phone on your wall back in the old days that was in your car. And I got a call, and was Mr. Cody's secretary that said, Michael would like to see you as soon as you get here, immediately. It didn't sound good. So I called Olivia, and she said, you're in deep trouble, which I wasn't surprised. So I took it upon myself to even dare to be more different. I had already ordered the paper for the magazine. I did not check out the postal ramifications. If you put a magazine into a newspaper, you're paying third-class postage, and you have to poly-wrap it in order to get it on the newsstand, which cost a lot of money. So I made the decision to do that without telling any of our executives. Not so smart. And we were owned by ABC Television. We were part of a very big corporation, Cap Cities ABC. And I finally got to work that day, and I went down to see Mr. Cody, and I was certain I was going to be fired. I was certain I was going to be fired. I called home, I called my mom and dad, and I said, this is it. And I called Bill, and I said, it's over, done, I'm going to be out. So I got screamed at for about an hour, screamed at. And I decided that, okay, well, this is over. And I told him, Mr. Cody, there's no reason to be that upset. I already have 100 ad pages sold in the new magazine. And he just looked at me and he goes, really? Where are the orders? I said, I'll get them to you. They're all in for the spring edition. And he said, oh, you have 100 ad pages sold. I said, yep, I do. So they were all committed, Neiman's, Donna, Ralph, Mr. Armani, Gianni Versace. I can go on, just to name a few. They all supported myself and Patrick. And it was the new future of W Magazine. The new magazine had 100 ad pages in it for spring. By fall, we had 350 ad pages. We were stealing money from Vogue and Glamour and In Style. Remember that one. It was a tremendous success. So we had a gathering, celebration, that everything was phenomenal. And I need a volunteer, or I'm actually going to just pick you. I want you to read this. This is what was given to me when the magazine was launched by Michael Cody, who screamed at me for an hour. And he brought me up in front of the whole staff, and here's what he said.
I'm a great hockey player because I don't skate to where the puck is, but rather to where the puck will be. Wayne Gretzky.
And you know what he said? Stephanie, we're so proud of you. Well done. Well, I became the president of Fairchild Publications for 15 years and ran all their magazines, and then was actually called by a woman named Ann Moore, the president, very first female executive of Time Warner. She ran all of Time Inc. magazines. At the time, there were 30 of them. And she asked me to meet her on the West Side for coffee, and I felt like I was cheating on my husband or something. Like, I loved my job at Fairchild. But I went, and I was happy where I was, but I felt like, okay, talk about luck and timing. It ends up, we were talking to one another, and she said, where are you from? And I said, I'm a small town in New Jersey. You wouldn't know it. She goes, try me. I said, Vineland. She goes, oh my God, you must have gone to school with my niece, Kathy. I said, yeah, I did. Funny, I just saw her at the class reunion. Well, she graduated with my dad. Her niece graduated with me. And I was getting calls from Leonard Lauder and from Donna, and Ralph saying, you have to go meet Ann. I did. I interviewed with 30 executives. 30 executives from Time Warner, Dick Parsons, Jeff Bewkes. And I thought, why am I doing this? I'm running a whole company. Why would I want to go run one magazine called InStyle? Well, InStyle was bigger than the entire company of Fairchild. So after all those interviews, I made it a point, again, to dare to be different. And I was hired 3 months after thousands of interviews. And I ended up leading InStyle as president, then president of People magazine, and I became president of Time Inc. several years later, running Real Simple, Essence, Sports Illustrated, Time, Fortune, all of American Express Publishing. I served on the board of American Express. I ran Departures and Travel and Leisure and all of those magazines. They sent me down to Birmingham in Alabama, and I ended up running all of the Southern Living magazines, Coastal Living, Southern Living, Cooking Light. Anyway, I had 61 magazines and 6,000 employees in 15 years. So here's the lesson. And Steve Jobs was on the cover of Fortune, and I had the pleasure of having breakfast with him. And he said, I said, what's your advice? I have plenty that I can give to others, but what's yours? And he said, well, find something you love and stick with it. It could be a transformative, long, long journey, like it was for me in the back of my garage. But if you're lucky enough to find what you love to do, and you're really great at it, stick with it through all the ups and downs. And that was the story of my career. So I'm a believer. And my point today is I hope all of you are. Because if it can happen to me, it can happen to all of you. You just have to want it badly. Follow your dreams and your hearts. You're going to hit many bumps in the road, but you'll make your dreams come true. And now listen to me. This is the last part. You've all won the prize and privilege of adulthood. You're all adults. You're not kids. And with that comes responsibility. Be tough, be kind, and extremely, extremely determined. And never let anyone underestimate you, ever. Nothing beats a failure in this life but a try. Nothing beats a failure but a try. Never give up. And you don't have to be the smartest person. You don't. It's good if you are, but you don't have to be. But you have to be the hardest working, most determined person with the most drive and the most ambition. And when you get there, you don't get there alone. You surround yourself with the very best people. I didn't do it alone. I hired great people. People that were smarter than me, were better than me, but they were my employees, 6,000 of them. And I knew them by name, and I knew their families by name, and I made it a point to walk around the office every morning and say, good morning. How are you today? What are we doing today? Have a great day. We're going to have a better day than yesterday. You can't succeed alone, and you won't. Now, at this point in my career, and I'll end it on this note, I'm on the board of Burberry. I've been on the board for 14 years, 3 months. And it's coming to an end in July. Because you can only serve on a United Kingdom board for 9 years. And somehow I snuck under the wire. I'm 5 years over my time limit. So I have 2 more meetings coming up. But it was remarkable. And I was hired for my marketing and advertising talents. I was in charge of the marketing part of the board. I was on the board of Lincoln Center for Marketing and Communications, on the board of the Fashion Institute of Technology for Marketing and Communications. And marketing means understanding understanding different groups of people. And technology has changed over the years for sure, and it's no surprise that back in the 1800s, there were these bonehead thinking groups, which we now call crowdsourcing. It goes back to the 1800s. And there was this gentleman, an English writer in London, who worked for the London Times, the Sunday London of the Times, and he worked for Charles Dickens. He was a writer for Charles Dickens. And his book is called The Memoir of Extraordinary Popular Delusions and Madness of Crowds. And this book was required reading for me and all of my employees and for the entire Burberry board and for the entire FAT board. My gift to the school today is I ordered 80 copies of the book, one for all of you. They're not here now, heavy lifting. But this is the book. And I don't expect you to read it now because you're studying, and it's a tough book to get through. But you'll remember that you'll learn a lot. If you pursue your international marketing and communications career, read this. Technology today is different than it was yesterday, but believe me, it dates back to the 1800s. So with that, I want to wish all of you the very, very best in your careers. Never underestimate, as I said, and you're running your own race. It starts with you. Take chances. Be brave. And I wish you the best of luck. At this point, if there's any questions or further comments, please feel free to ask. That's what I'm here for. And if not, that's okay too. I know that some of you may be a little shy about raising your hands or have to get off to another class. But it was a pleasure to speak with all of you today. Real pleasure.